When we see an image of conflict, our instinct is to trust it. We treat the photograph as a transparent window, a direct connection to the visceral ground truth of the battlefield. But war is a paradox of proximity. It is endured physically by a minuscule fraction of the global population, yet it is judged, funded, and understood by millions of distant observers, whose entire experience is mediated through screens. That vast distance creates a psychological vacuum. Humans require ontological security, a stable understanding of the world. To buffer our fear of senseless violence, we seek narratives that structure chaos into digestible struggles of good versus evil. The camera does not organically capture that story. The act of taking a photograph is a rhetorical act of interpretation, governed by the physical constraints of angle and timing. It is an instrument of interpretation, not a mechanical witness. This illustrates the geometry of exclusion. Pointing a lens focuses on a specific subject, defining inclusion by spatial omission. Looking outside that focal cone reveals uncaptured reality. The broader context, preceding provocations, and systemic causes of violence are explicitly left in the dark. The camera is a tool of intense curation. It protects the viewer's psychological stability by compressing multidimensional complexity of war into a localized, weaponized story. During the Vietnam War, the first television war, journalists operated without the strict military press censorship of previous conflicts. This uncensored access repeatedly shattered the U.S. government's sanitized narrative of progress, broadcasting raw combat directly into American living rooms. The military learned a strategic lesson from that loss of narrative control. For the 2003 invasion of Iraq, the Department of Defense launched the Embedded Media Program. Hundreds of credentialed journalists lived and traveled directly inside active combat units. While this provided intimate access, it created a proximity bias. Independent reporting without military protection was often impossible, leaving embedded journalists reliant on the troops for their physical safety and logistical movement. Penn State researchers analyzed 742 print articles from the early months of the invasion, revealing a stark structural bias. Embedded journalists devoted 88% of their coverage to U.S. soldiers' experiences. Conversely, the impact on Iraqi civilians received only 12% of the reporting emphasis. By managing the physical standpoint of the journalist, the military gained significant influence over the narrative. This structural dependency allowed the war to be presented as a story of military camaraderie and operational success, while the scale of civilian suffering remained largely outside the frame. Even when the footage reaches the home front, the framing process continues through institutional bias. International media organizations parse identical statistics and video clips to construct divergent realities that cater to their specific geographic audiences and ideological alliances. A comparative analysis of broadcasters covering the 2023 Gaza conflict exposes this editorial gatekeeping. Al Jazeera heavily utilized terms like massacre and occupation to emphasize historical grievances. Conversely, CNN International prioritized the mechanics of the military engagement, using words like defense and militant. Today, smartphones have turned the front line into a networked battlespace. Real-time footage from civilians and soldiers on platforms like Telegram and TikTok now bypasses traditional journalistic filters to reach global audiences in seconds. But social media operates on proprietary algorithms built to maximize engagement. These systems prioritize algorithmic emotion, content that triggers immediate reactions like anger, fear, and grief. To achieve virality, the vital historical context of a video is often stripped away. This environment is easily exploited by generative AI, like a 2022 deepfake depicting President Zelensky surrendering. It was a fabricated record designed specifically to sow confusion and erode trust in democratic leadership. Authoritarian regimes view this digital landscape as an active battle space. They deploy cyber mercenaries and fabricated news sites to flood international networks with disinformation, protecting their domestic narrative while seeking to fracture Western consensus. The combination of algorithmic curation and AI fabrication allows state actors to flood our feeds with hyper-realistic evidence of events that never occurred. We have more visual data than at any point in history, yet verifying even a single ground truth has become a specialized, often impossible task. The camera captures the kinetic energy of an explosion or a ruined building, but it cannot record war's chronic dimensions, the logistical boredom, moral ambiguity, and internal psychological trauma that remains long after the smoke clears. This gap is stark in veteran health. Media narratives lead the public to believe up to 67% of veterans suffer from PTSD, but clinical data shows the actual prevalence for post-9/11 veterans is only 11 to 20%. That stereotypical framing creates social stigma and obscures more widespread struggles. It hides the difficult transition from a rigid military hierarchy to civilian life and the silent burden of moral injury, the psychological wound sustained when actions betray a person's core moral beliefs. For civilians, the focus on spectacular violence marginalizes their daily struggle for survival. The collapse of social networks and the intergenerational transmission of trauma cannot be encapsulated in a viral 15-second post or a single photograph. The reach of digital media ensures this trauma is no longer confined to the battlefield. Studies show distant civilians can develop symptoms of depression and anxiety simply by consuming graphic war footage through their social media feeds. War is an asymmetric cognitive struggle. States, platforms, and media organizations contest the visual narrative to protect the observer's sense of security, while the lived, traumatic reality of the conflict remains in the dark. To see war more clearly, we must interrogate the boundaries of the images presented to us. We have to look past the focal point and start asking exactly what was deliberately left out of the frame.